process documentation.
Thank you. So yeah, actually, I'm really excited to be here today and yesterday and to listen to some of the other talks as well and get to learn more about what you guys are doing. And I'm definitely not a technical writer, so this is very interesting for me to get that perspective. Most of the clients in the industries that I've worked don't really have a lot of experience with this sort of thing. So it's very much, today we're going to be talking very much about what my on-the-ground experiences were trying to get documentation in practice in an organization. So a little bit about me. I'm a continuous improvement person. That's what I do. I'm interested in Lean, Six Sigma, customer experience, a little bit of Agile, and process design, but also product design. And what's interesting to me is how to get value. So that's what Lean is all about, is getting value. So making sure that we're doing our best to get the value out of the interactions that we have with the customer when they're using the product or the service. So that means I do a lot of consulting and training. I'll go into an organization. I'll try to get loads of people to be interested in these concepts, give them some practical tools, and hopefully get them to do that sort of thing as part of their day-to-day work. That means I travel a lot. I go from loads of different locations, either inside an organization or going from organization to organization, and a lot of sharing best practice as well. And the way that I tend to interact with documentation is very much around documenting process, ways of working, for teams and for customers, so internally and externally, and how they interact with our products and services. So it's very much understanding what documentation is needed for people, for users, when they're using a product or service. So why am I here? I'm not a document writer. I don't do this as part of my normal thing. Well, I'm here because my clients love the results of continuous improvement and Lean. They're very happy about it, but they really hate documentation. I'm sure this is not so uncommon, but a lot of the industries that I work, it's not part of the normal way of working. They don't have a lot of documentation available, and it's not something that they usually use to either service for their customers or for anything else. Sorry, thank you. So one reason that they have not approached this previously is that there's a little bit of a learning curve. If you've never, ever worked with documentation, then of course you need to learn how to do it. And that's something that can be very challenging if you have no experience with it and no technical writers available. There can also be time constraints. So if you're working on a specific project or a piece of work, there'll be a time constraint where you have a certain amount of time that you need to implement something, and especially if it's a new area, you're not going to want to try to get involved with that. And also, sometimes we're still getting buy-in. So if I'm coming into an organization and they don't really understand Lean or they don't understand a certain way of working that's better, it's very early to get them to start documenting it because they don't understand it yet. So some typical excuses that I've heard when I've tried to get people to document. We've never done it before, we don't know how. I didn't know that I had to. Maybe there's too much to confront. So it's a daunting task if you've got a large organization or a service with loads of features or a product with loads of features and they've never done any documentation before. It's a massive undertaking, especially if you've never done it. Sometimes people try to put a one-size-fits-all approach, and that clearly doesn't work. If you've got some things that need a lot of information, a lot of detail, and some things that are very simple, you can't standardize or put templates in this kind of way. Unrealistic scale, that's another one. So people want to try to solve world hunger, to do everything absolutely at once, and it's unrealistic to do it. You have to break it down into smaller increments. And another one is, we have documents, we just don't use them. And that's could be heartbreaking, but it's a bit annoying. And the reason for that is that it's out of date, right? So they go through this massive undertaking and they do all of this documentation. One client I worked with, it took them 2 years to document all of their process and product and service. And then by the time they were finished, it was out of date. right? So it's already not fit for purpose. So if you're in a situation like this, of course you're not going to want to put your time and energy and effort into maintaining docs, because why would you if you're not using them? So these are the 4 points I want to get across today. 4 tips that I've thought were, as a principle, were very handy for streamlining and applying lean to working with documentation. So firstly, eliminate the need. If you don't need that product or service, if it's waste, if it's a feature that people aren't using, why bother documenting it? Get rid of it. Take care of the problem at the source. Show, don't tell, use visuals, use videos, whatever you need to do to make it engaging for people. It's actually a lot more effective. Target value, so make sure that you're actually targeting the things that, the interactions that have the most value when you're prioritizing what you want to document first. And finally, make it normal or not at all. So if it's not part of the new normal way of working and people are not using it every day, don't bother, because it's only going to go out of date. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about eliminating the need. Obviously, I mean, the easiest way to do it would be to make the process or the product or the task or the thing that you're trying to document simpler. Sometimes that's not possible, right? And simple, as we talked about yesterday, can be subjective, right? But if we're thinking about this, what this really means is if something is wasteful, or if there's an activity or there's a feature that's not being used or is not appreciated, why go through the pain and the effort of documenting it? Yeah? Why are we going to build this extra layer of process around it and this extra layer of documentation if it's not something that the customer actually wants or the user actually wants? And to do this, we need to know what the user wants, right? So hopefully you've done some research around that. But if you don't know, it's a good time to start asking those questions before you embark on this experience of documenting everything. Intuitive design is really important. If you have design that's intuitive, and this is very dependent on what you're doing, what product you have, what service you have, then there's a lot less to explain. So either maybe you won't need as much documentation, or when you're writing it, it's going to be much easier to communicate and convey certain ideas. Low impact errors. So if you have a service or a product that is, when something goes wrong, there's low impact on the customer, there's low impact on what's actually going to happen, then the risk of, they might be able to figure it out, right? Or maybe it'll be easier to get them out of that situation and find them that pathway, right? So if you can make sure that when you're working with that service, you're working together with the product designers or the service designers to make sure that that happens, then you can streamline that in your documentation and make sure that it's clear what they need to do next. This is a really important concept I think people forget. If we are repeating a task over and over again, then it's much easier for us to remember what we need to do, right? So if you have a feature or something that someone is using repetitively or consistently over and over again, there's going to be a lot less need for explanation and clarification. And they'll be able to retain that information on how to do that task or use that thing, okay? So high repetition means that I remember, I know how to do something. So that sounds great, right? But how? How do we do this? Well, you can look at risk. So if you apply a risk lens and look at what you're actually offering to the user, where are the risk points where things could actually go wrong? So you don't necessarily need to wait until you have the data. Ideally, you would do some research or you'd do some testing and you'd work out where the actual issues are occurring. But if you don't have that, you can apply a risk lens and see if you can predict that and try to beef up your documentation there. Working backwards is really useful. If you want to understand how to simplify what you're doing, you can envision the ideal and then work backwards. What are the steps that we need to take to make that actually happen? The 5 whys is really, really brilliant. Has anyone heard of the 5 whys? Some of you? It's really simple. It's basically like if you're a child, right? You're asking why over and over again. And it can be very irritating if you're trying to ask that question about things that are going wrong with your product. But you get to some very interesting reasons why things are actually happening. So if we're looking at this example, if you just keep asking why, you're going to get to a lot of the systemic things that are happening, the cultural issues, the things that are happening in the organization that are going to create those issues with your product or service. And if you start tackling those at the source, then you have a lot less need to explain, clarify everything. This is an interesting one, show, don't tell. I think we kind of appreciate this in principle. In Lean, we refer to this as on-the-ground instructions. Obviously, you don't need to use this terminology. But on-the-ground instructions are put near the thing, so you put it near the service or the feature that you're using. Visual is always better, so it's visual documentation. And it's showing how it's done or how it's not done. So you either have a cautionary one where it's showing don't do it this way, or showing visually how it's done. Now, you can use this with videos, you can use this with diagrams. There's many different ways that you can do that. And I think we've all seen, when you go in a restaurant, they have near the sinks in the restrooms these little signs saying, washing your hands. They're very visual. We think we know how to wash our hands, right? Hopefully we all know how to wash our hands. But the images are going to show you generally what they're expecting from you, yeah? So this is an interesting example of what on-the-ground instructions can look like. If you go to the monkey forest in Ubud in Bali, you'll see this sign as you enter. And it's just a list of commands, very bossy, right? And it's a lot of information. Yeah? It's a lot of information to try to take in, especially if you're having a casual stroll into the park, right? And what tends to happen is people don't read it, and then this happens. Yeah? Because they didn't read the instructions. And you could, blame the user in this scenario and say they didn't read the instructions. But realistically, if you're not prioritizing what are the key points, what do I really need to know? Yeah? Am I going to stand there and read all of this? So the key points are, don't look the monkeys in the eye, apparently. Don't ever touch or grab the monkeys, and don't feed them. Now, if I know these three things, I can probably get through the park without being attacked by monkeys. Right? But I won't know those three things because I'm looking at this wall of text. Right? So it's prioritizing what information I actually need to get through this experience. Compare that to, I've got this lovely image from Japan that I took while I was there. I don't remember which city, but I don't read Japanese. Maybe some of you do, but I'm pretty sure that means don't feed the pigeons. Yeah? So the other sign is relying on my knowledge of English, my patience and my time to stand there and read the whole thing. This one is very clear, very visual, and I understand immediately that I'm not supposed to feed the pigeons. And more than that, the pigeon is making an expression telling me that he's very unhappy, right? So I'm empathizing with the pigeon and I'm starting to understand why. It's not just a command, right? So it's not do not feed the pigeons. It's look at this impact you're going to have on this poor pigeon. So here's another great one that uses empathy. This is also from Japan, and it's a wonderful visual diagram that was found in a taxi. And we basically have the worst passenger ever here. Yeah, he's harassing the driver, he's smoking, he's kicking the back of the seat. And again, I don't need to know Japanese. I can look at this and it tells a story. So I understand also not just what happens, but also why. I'm empathizing with the driver. So you notice they've done the illustrations so that you're seeing the face of the driver. So you're not just getting the information of don't do this, which can be very bossy. I mean, we don't like to be told what to do, right? What we're getting here also is why. Look at the impact that you're having on the driver. Look at how they're feeling. We're being called to have empathy. And by doing that, it makes us understand, okay, yeah, that's a good thing. I shouldn't do that, right? So if anyone's traveled in Asia, you've probably seen this one. It's pretty simple. It's a diagram, not to use a Western toilet like an Asian one. That's fine. But this was greatly improved in the airport in Kuala Lumpur. I was really impressed by this. So this is visual documentation that is in the ladies' toilets in Kuala Lumpur. And it takes something, it's the same idea, right? But it's presented in a humorous and engaging way. And you get a little green check to indicate this is something we want you to do. It's not a cautionary diagram, this is something we want you to do. And it calls you to have fun and to laugh and to feel a certain way, all right? So it's not a command. And if we actually expand on this, there's other documentation there. So don't wash your feet in the sink, but it's presented as we care for your safety. Yeah, we care for your safety. This is why we don't want you to wash your feet in the sink. And they're showing what could happen if you attempt to do that. Yeah, so again, it's calling to the reasons why. We want to understand why we're being told to do something. Here's I think this is probably my favorite. This is my favorite on-the-ground instruction that I've ever seen, and I use this a lot in my training. But it's taking something that people might have some discomfort talking about, it's presenting it in a humorous way, and it's using that to engage with people so that they pay attention, take it seriously, and actually do what you ask them to do. So, what next? So we understand, okay, we want to make it visual, we want to make it engaging, we want to only document the things that matter. Let's target value. Let's target the interactions and the aspects of our service that are making the most sense for people that they're using most frequently. So document what matters first. I mean, this is a nice principle to have. Areas of risk we talked about earlier. This is a great place to start. If something is risky, you probably want to get that documented. Right? If there's a potential for something to go wrong, that's an area where we want to approach. Customer interactions, we're going to talk about how to do that, but you want to look at where the customer interactions are and prioritize those. And maybe the pain points. So if there's something that's going wrong frequently, this is an opportunity to use documentation to address that issue. Also common mistakes. So things where customers or users are making the same kind of mistake over and over again. This is a good opportunity to understand what's going wrong, either with fixing the process or changing the documentation. And it's important to talk about moments of truth. Moments of truth was a concept brought forward by Jan Carlson. He was the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines in the 80s. And the airlines weren't doing very well. And what they found actually is that the value for them of their company and of their product and service was not in the fleet of the airlines or the training of the staff or anything like this. It was in the actual interactions that people were having. And it completely changed the model of how they approached what they did. So what they've talked about with the moments of truth is to take a 3-step approach. Identify the customer surface. So where is the customer interacting with you or with your product? Select the critical areas. So where are the areas that actually matter? Not all of it is going to be the same. There will be some interactions that are very unemotional and unimportant. And take the ones that matter and improve those. And probably in most of your cases, you're going to be improving them by adjusting how it's described or explained. So I've got here some real instructions that were next to the lifts in one of the buildings I used to work. And I hated them. I really hated them. And there were so many problems with those lifts. People were constantly queuing and giving up and complaining. They would be full, things were going wrong. And it really irritated me because it was saying to select the destination floor. First of all, I know how to push a button. Okay, so don't tell me as a customer that I don't know how to push a button. Also move. What, am I sedentary? Like, do I need to do some exercise? Why am I being told to move? And the journey, don't get me started on that. The journey? Am I going on a voyage? I'm just going to floor 4. Some of the wording just didn't make any sense. And there was a lot of text, right? Who's going to actually read all of this? Especially if they're in a rush going to work. So if we looked at it really, and we've mapped out what the process really looked like, I'm choosing the floor, maybe the machine's telling me the lift is full, or it's going to telling me to go to a different lift. And if it's telling me it's full, I might be told to try again later. If I'm really tired, oh God, now I have to think about this. Do I want to walk up all these stairs? Maybe I can wait. What are the consequences here for me? And if you look at it from the moments of truth point of view, the customer service is almost the entire thing. The only thing that I don't see is the calculation going on behind the scenes where the lift is working out which floor to send me or which lift to send me, right? I don't see that. So if we're thinking about it from the points of those documentation, the moments of truth, these key moments, that made sense. They were telling me at the right moments what to do. It's just that the instructions were wrong because they couldn't help me from avoiding making those errors. Okay? So I propose this change. Rather than move, maybe enter, because that's more accurately describing what you're doing. Rather than the journey, maybe go. It's simple, it makes sense. And changing the wording to avoid the potential errors, right? So rather than assuming that everything is going to go well, select the floor and you will be given the right information. Well, I wasn't. So choose your floor. If lifts are full, advise reception. So now I have a pathway. If something goes wrong, I know what I need to do. I can go and speak to reception and they can sort something out. I don't have to just stand there and ponder my life and consider a career change, right? Locate the lift and enter. If the lift is full, select your floor to call for a new lift. So again, providing a pathway, right? Helping people work through the frustration and figure out what they need to do next. Okay, and then the last one, if the floor isn't lit on the inside panel, exit and try again. Yeah? Also, there's less words, which I always like, right? Less jargon, less nonsense. Okay, most important, if you do nothing else, please do this. And I'm sure most of you do this already, but it's a nice little axiom. Normalize or not at all. Use it or lose it, right? Either use it or use the documentation as part of what the business are doing every day or the customer is doing every day, or get rid of it. And that's maybe sounds a bit harsh, but if something is sitting on the shelf and not being used, it's much more likely to go out of date. So it's very important that everyone updates with every change. So my attitude for this is that everyone needs to be involved, and particularly because the organizations that I'm working, they don't have technical writers, they don't have teams that work on this. It's very much up to us to make it happen. So we make it happen. Everyone updates with every change. And what that does is it allows people that are actively doing the work in their teams, especially in an agile environment, they're making changes constantly. So they have the access and the power to keep those documents up to date. Internal and external alignment, I mean, this goes without saying. We want to make sure that what we do internally aligns with what's being presented to the user. And also visual management tools, so any kind of stand-ups or anything like that, you can use your docs as a way to mark them up and use them as part of your process improvement activities. Use them for your continuous improvement. Have them on the wall, scribble on them, use them to communicate, hey, this part people don't really understand, or this is where we're getting a lot of complaints. So in this example, we can take this and tack it on the wall, and then whenever we observe things going wrong with the process, we can put a little red dot. In Lean, that's actually called a measles chart. I'm sure you can see why. And you don't have to use dots. You can use people's faces, you can use dates, you can use whatever you feel like. But the idea is that you're collecting in a casual way, but in a consistent way, what's going wrong. So just to recap, eliminate the need. So if you don't have a particular feature if you have a feature that people aren't using, get rid of it. Show, don't tell. So use visual documentation wherever you can. Videos, images, not just because they communicate more effectively, but because they tell the person why they're doing something. Target value. Focus on the things that actually have the biggest impact for your users. And finally, make it normal or don't make it at all. So make it as part of what people do every day, or don't do it. Okay? Thank you very much. Hopefully that tells you everything you need to know.